As a person who's perpetually cold, I very much appreciate the socks, and I'm sure my kids will steal them as they steal much of everything. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy, for having me here today and for your continued leadership and dedication to improving identity solutions. And let me begin by thanking our incredible hosts here today, the Better Identity Coalition, the ID Theft Resource Center, and the FIDO Alliance. As Jeremy just said, prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, I spent some time in the financial services sector, where I had the opportunity to explore the policies around resilient digital identity solutions through public-private partnerships, through things like the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council. And I'm excited to be back here today in my role as the Senior Director for Cyber and Emerging Tech, where I worked alongside a dedicated team led by Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger, working to advance national security, economic prosperity, and technical innovation. For those of you guys who heard my name, and we're going to be talking about identity today, I am Clarke with an E, a 40-something mother of three, not Caitlin Clarke, a 22-year-old amazing basketball player from Iowa. But for the last year, it has been one of the greatest experiences of my life, of everybody saying, Caitlin Clarke, I know that name. It's never happened to me before in my life. I was the only Caitlin I knew growing up, and now who knew? I am famous, which works well for my school-age children, that they can say my mom has that same name. But needless to say, I know a lot about Caitlin Clarke. So that whole piece that Jeremy just talked about knowing 5 things about a person to be able to have their identity makes it a lot easier when you already have their same name. It's been an interesting year, but I want to dive into the threat around identity and why it matters to us at the Biden-Harris administration, what we're doing about it, and then just kind of leaving you all to think about what we can be doing further. As Jeremy said, you've been presenting a lot of ideas. It's up to us in the government to take those and run with them. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about where we can improve. And I really do appreciate that you hold us accountable as we look at this, because this is we talk about a lot about issues that can be solved by the government, by private sector. This is clearly identity. Verification, authentication is clearly something that needs to be done both by the private sector and the government, and we need to work together on that. But I want to start with, when the Biden-Harris administration came into office, President Biden emphasized the importance of elevating how we address cyber and tech issues from a national security perspective, because the cyber threats affect every sector of our society, from critical infrastructure that underpins our daily lives to the schools where we educate our children and the products we use in our homes. Rapid innovation has brought unprecedented convenience and efficiency to everyday Americans. For example, from the time I woke up this morning, I've been able to, via one device, check my email, my bank account balance, and what homework assignments my children may or may not have completed for the end of this grading period. And that last one is the bane of my children's existence, since they are no longer able to tell me what happened in school today. Nothing, no homework, nothing to see here. I am able now to log in as their parent and see every assignment, what they've done and what they have not done, which my son really enjoys going forward. So these are the smaller benefits, but we know that there are advancements in technology that are poised to define the landscape of the future. For example, the combination of AI, advanced telecommunications, and quantum sensors will generate leap-ahead breakthroughs in drug discoveries, food security in an age of extreme weather, and clean energy in an era where we're fighting climate change. And while we know everyday technologies and the advanced technologies we are developing will offer tremendous promise to advance our economies and our societies, they will also create some peril. And we have seen how the technologies we rely on are targets for hackers and criminals, as Jeremy said. And as he said, and you will hear after me, cybercrime continues to be on the rise. In the first half of 2023, ransomware attacks worldwide increased by 45% compared to the last half of 2022. The United States remains the most highly targeted country in the world, with 46% of global cyber attacks being directed towards Americans. The average cost of cybercrime worldwide is expected to soar from $8.4 trillion in 2022 to $23 trillion in 2027. I want to repeat that, from 8.4 trillion just last year to 23 trillion in the next 3 years. And in 2022, the average cost of a data breach in the United States was $9.4 million. Money is fueling the cyber crime and the ecosystem of crime, but we often see that identity is either the target or the culprit in the cyber incidents that we are seeing every day, either by exploiting weak vulnerabilities in identity and access management, products that are end of life that don't require authentication or rely on a default password, and that is all you need to authenticate into a system. Or cyber intrusions are specifically targeting identity information, aiming to exfiltrate personally identifiable information and credential information to eventually monetize and use in conduct of further fraud and cybercrime. Unfortunately, we've seen a significant amount of ransomware attacks against schools, where some of the information that is being targeted by the cyber criminals are the students' information. The information of children under the age of 18 who don't yet have a credit record, who have a social security number, and are ripe for their information to be taken. So this is why we are focused significantly on actions we can take to start reducing these numbers. These numbers are daunting, but we've been really working hard to address how we reduce these risks. And let me first start with authentication. Within the first months of the administration, the president defined 5 high-impact cybersecurity practices to be implemented with speed and urgency across the federal civilian executive branch in Executive Order 14028. Those 5 were multi-factor authentication upfront and first, multi-factor authentication. Secondly, endpoint detection and response. Encryption, so if data was exfiltrated, that it's encrypted and harder to gain access to. Logging, so we know what was actually exfiltrated, and establishing skilled security teams to look for the malicious activity on networks. We are laser focused on these controls and practices across the government. And at the NSC, we regularly work with our partners in my home office of the Office of National Cyber Director and the Office of Management and Budget to track our progress and ensure that we are continuing to fund investments in the cybersecurity of the federal government. We cannot expect others to improve their cybersecurity if we are not doing it ourselves. So the EO served as our roadmap for securing the federal enterprise, but it paved the way for our framework for the zero trust strategy that OMB released. And I know the federal CISO, Chris DeRusha, will be here later, so I'm not gonna dig into what he will be sharing with you all, but we really needed to rapidly evolve our cybersecurity approach at the federal government, and moving to the principles of zero trust is the approach that we needed to take. This is a change. And it is going to take some more time. This is a fundamental change on how we address cybersecurity in the federal government. So we are continuing to press, continuing to gather information, continuing to understand what we need to do to fund and ensure that we are making these changes. We strongly believe that implementing MFA, especially phishing resistant MFA, not just the text to your phone that someone might be able to intercept, is critical to locking our digital doors. We need to make it harder for threat actors to gain access into systems by requiring and ensuring that a person is who they say they are beyond a username and password. That is why authentication is also at the heart of the work we are doing to improve the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, upon which we all rely. I was just outside trying to get here and the traffic lights were blinking, and God forbid, they all went down, right? So in the sectors where we've put in minimum cybersecurity standards, specifically rail, pipeline, aviation, we are not only requiring, but we are ensuring that owners and operators are implementing MFA. We are also putting best practices on authentication into the hands of those best postured to take action. Good example being CISA's cross-sector performance goals, a voluntary set of baseline cybersecurity practices, which includes phishing-resistant MFA as one of those key controls. And I know you'll be hearing later today from Eric Goldstein on their work in that area and their continued work in the More Than a Password campaign. I am from Boston, but I will not sing that in the tune of Boston, just to spare you all. But every time I hear that, I do go straight to the song. So in addition to authentication, we continue to focus on key measures to improve online verification and combat the significant fraud that Jeremy just mentioned across commercial and government services. We recognize that the era of reliable identity verification based solely on knowledge of personal information is over. The President's national security strategy outlined the vision for how the government will support and enable the development of a digital identity ecosystem that is secure, privacy preserving, and consent based. And we have put NIST at the center of that program as authorized by the CHIPS and Science Act, and they are leading a digital identity research program to identify the best ways that federal and state governments or civil society industry partners can promote solutions that encourage those privacy, security, civil liberties, equity, accessibility, and interoperability. And we're really excited about the promise of the work that NIST kicked off in August through their National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, focusing on mobile driver's licenses to accelerate the adoption of digital identities on mobile devices. And this collaborative work will offer a clear technical blueprint for the acceptance and use of those credentials. One of the most important steps we can take to both protect individuals from criminals and make it harder for adversary countries to conduct successful cyber intrusions. I do want to end that over the last 18 months, we've been working with colleagues across the White House on solutions when it comes to digital identities, including in the context of reducing the fraud that Jeremy talked about. As he's mentioned, the GAO has reported there are billions of dollars in fraud on government programs due to inadequate ways the US government validates recipients' identities. So while we should ensure that people who are eligible for government programs are able to access those benefits, we are working to identify a number of actions that we believe will have a positive impact on digital identity and identity verification. So I ask you to bear with us as we continue along this pace. We will be looking to have more work in this area coming out soon, and I hope that you hold us accountable to that, Jeremy. But in closing, I just want to say, I'm going to quote something that my mother, who was an English teacher, used to tell me every day. Her favorite poet was the American poet Robert Frost, and she used to tell me, Caitlin, we have miles to go before we sleep. So every day when I come in, and I know that we've gotten a lot of work done to improve our digital ecosystem, I remind myself, we have miles to go before we sleep. And I thank each and every one of you here today who are committed to being in the fight with us on digital identity and improving authentication and verification. And again, I'm going to say this again, I ask you to hold us accountable. We work on behalf of the American people, and we want to make sure that we are doing the best that we can and continuing to move forward in this area. And so I thank you for having the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope to hear more about what you discussed today, and I'll be following up with Jeremy about what we can do to continue our work, where we can improve, where we've got gaps, and move out where we can. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I hope you have a fantastic program today. And I know you'll hear more about what the government is doing, what we intend to do from both the federal CISO, Chris DeRusha, as well as Eric Goldstein from CISA. So thank you very much.
Thanks. I know Caitlin's not able to take questions